The courtroom was silent as the next case was called. A teenage girl, dressed in expensive clothes and exuding an air of superiority, strutted to the defendant's stand. She barely spared a glance at the boy standing across from her, a boy she had insulted and humiliated just days before. She had never imagined that her words would have consequences. After all, she was used to getting her way. But what she didn't know, what no one in the room expected, was that the judge presiding over the case was not just any judge. He was the father of the boy she had demeaned, and justice on this day would be far more personal than she had ever anticipated. As the girl stood at the defendant's stand, she glanced around the courtroom with an air of impatience. She didn't belong here. This was a place for criminals, not someone like her. In her mind, the whole situation was absurd. The boy, standing quietly across from her, met her gaze but said nothing. He looked calm, almost indifferent, as if he had already made peace with whatever would come next. But there was something in his eyes, a quiet confidence that unsettled her. "All rise," the bailiff's voice echoed through the room. The girl turned toward the judge's bench, expecting to see an unfamiliar face. Instead, as the judge stepped forward and took his seat, a wave of unease washed over her. The man sitting before her was not just any judge. He had the same eyes as the boy she had insulted. His expression was unreadable, but the weight of his presence was undeniable. The girl's throat went dry. "This court is now in session," the judge announced, his voice firm but controlled. He adjusted his glasses and looked directly at her. "Miss Carter," he began, addressing her by name, "do you understand why you are here today?" She swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how small she felt under his gaze. "Yes, Your Honor," she muttered, but her usual arrogance wavered. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Then let's begin." The courtroom fell into silence once more. The air in the courtroom grew heavier as the proceedings began. Miss Carter, usually brimming with confidence, now sat rigidly, her hands clenched in her lap. The prosecutor stood up and addressed the court. "Your Honor, we are here today to discuss an incident of verbal assault and racial harassment that took place 3 days ago outside Lincoln High School." Miss Carter shifted uncomfortably. She had thought this would be a minor matter, perhaps a fine or a warning, but as she glanced around, she saw the seriousness in everyone's eyes. The prosecutor continued. "On that day, the defendant, Miss Carter, publicly humiliated and insulted the plaintiff, Mr. Jordan Williams, using racial slurs and degrading language. Multiple witnesses confirmed that she referred to him with offensive terms and questioned his worth in society." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The judge, his face impassive, tapped his gavel lightly. "Silence," he ordered. Miss Carter's eyes darted toward Jordan, the boy she had insulted. He stood still, his posture upright, his face calm but resolute. Then the judge spoke, his deep voice measured. "Miss Carter, you are accused of racial harassment. This court takes such matters seriously. Do you deny the accusations?" She hesitated, her breath quickening. I was just joking," she stammered. "I didn't mean anything by it." The judge's eyes darkened. "A joke?" he repeated, his tone cold. Miss Carter felt a lump in her throat. She had expected to be reprimanded, but the weight of the moment was far greater than she had imagined. The prosecutor stepped forward again. Your Honor, I would like to call the first witness. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and an elderly woman walked in. She was a school teacher, one of the witnesses to the incident. As she took the stand, she adjusted her glasses and fixed her gaze on Miss Carter. I saw everything, the woman said, and what I saw was not a joke. Miss Carter's heart pounded. For the first time, she realized this wasn't going away easily. The judge, still calm, still collected, looked at her once more. Miss Carter, do you understand the gravity of your actions? Her lips parted, but no words came out. This was no longer just a courtroom proceeding. It was a reckoning. Miss Carter felt her chest tighten. The air in the courtroom was thick with expectation. She glanced at the elderly teacher on the witness stand, then at the judge, whose piercing gaze never wavered. The teacher adjusted her glasses and spoke firmly. I was there that afternoon. I saw how Miss Carter mocked Jordan Williams in front of his classmates. She called him names that I will not repeat in this courtroom. She laughed as others joined in. And when Jordan tried to walk away, she followed him, taunting him even more. Miss Carter's face burned. She had never thought much about what happened that day. It had been nothing more than a stupid moment, a way to impress her friends. She hadn't expected it to follow her into a courtroom, under the watchful eyes of a judge who now seemed more imposing than ever. The prosecutor turned to Jordan. Mr. Williams, can you tell the court how this incident affected you? Jordan hesitated for a brief moment before stepping forward. He cleared his throat. His voice was calm but firm. I've dealt with things like this before, he began. But what made this different was how public it was. How humiliating it was. He exhaled. I didn't even know how to respond. I just stood there while everyone laughed. He looked directly at Miss Carter. I don't think you even realized what you were doing. Maybe you thought it was just a joke. But that joke, your words, stayed with me. They made me feel like I didn't belong, like I was nothing. The courtroom was silent. Miss Carter lowered her gaze. For the first time, she felt something she hadn't before, shame. The judge finally spoke, his voice measured but firm. Miss Carter, do you have anything to say in response? Her throat felt dry. She opened her mouth but hesitated. How could she defend herself? The words she had thrown at Jordan so carelessly now felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. She started but then stopped. The judge's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes. This wasn't just about the law. This was about something deeper. Justice, accountability, and maybe, just maybe, redemption. Miss Carter swallowed hard. She had a choice to make. And the whole courtroom was waiting. Miss Carter's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the stand. The weight of the silence in the courtroom pressed against her, demanding an answer. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. The judge's expression remained impassive. And yet, it did. Miss Carter swallowed hard. I was just trying to impress my friends. I wasn't thinking. Jordan let out a quiet, controlled breath. That's the problem, he said. People like you don't have to think about what you say. But people like me, we don't get to forget. The words hit Miss Carter like a blow. For the first time, she saw the pain she had caused, not just as an abstract consequence, but as something real, something that had settled into Jordan's life in a way she could never take back. The judge tapped his gavel once. "Miss Carter, this court is not just here to determine whether or not you were thinking. It is here to determine whether you are willing to take responsibility." He leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on a heavier tone. "Do you understand the seriousness of your actions?" Miss Carter hesitated. A part of her wanted to lash out, to argue that it was just words, just a mistake. But looking at Jordan, at the judge, at his father, she knew that wouldn't be enough. She nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge exhaled, his stern expression not softening but shifting slightly. "Good. Then let's discuss the consequences." A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. Miss Carter's heart pounded. "The court takes racial harassment seriously," the judge continued. "However, I also believe in justice that teaches rather than simply punishes. Therefore, rather than jail time or a fine, I am ordering the following." Miss Carter held her breath. "You will complete 200 hours of community service at the Southside Youth Center, where you will work with underprivileged children, including many who have faced the kind of discrimination you demonstrated." Her stomach tightened. Community service? In a place like that? But the judge wasn't finished. "You will also attend a racial sensitivity course and submit a written reflection on what you've learned from this experience." His voice deepened. "I expect honesty. Anything less will be unacceptable." Miss Carter barely heard the rest. The gavel hit the wood with a final thud. "Court is adjourned." She stood frozen as people began to move around her. Jordan exchanged a brief glance with his father before turning to leave. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on her, heavier than she had expected. For the first time, she understood this wasn't just about a punishment. This was about change. And whether she liked it or not, her path forward had just been decided. Miss Carter sat in the passenger seat of her father's car, staring blankly out the window. The courthouse was now behind her, but the weight of the judge's ruling still clung to her like an iron chain. Her father, a well-dressed man with graying temples, gripped the steering wheel tightly. "I hope you understand how much trouble you've caused," he said, his voice tense. Miss Carter didn't answer. She wasn't sure if he was angry because of what she had done or because she had embarrassed the family. "I'll have my lawyer appeal." "No," she interrupted, surprising herself. She turned to face her father. "It won't change anything. I have to do it." Her father sighed but said nothing more. The rest of the ride home was silent. A week later, she stood in front of the Southside Youth Center, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The building was smaller than she expected, old but well kept. Children ran across the courtyard, their laughter ringing through the air. "This is your punishment?" a familiar voice said. Miss Carter turned quickly to see Jordan Williams, standing a few feet away. He wasn't in a suit now. He was wearing a simple hoodie and jeans, holding a folder under his arm. Her stomach twisted. "What are you doing here?" He raised an eyebrow. "I volunteer here. Have been for 2 years." Of course he did. Before she could say anything, a woman in her 40s with short curly hair walked out. "You must be Miss Carter." She smiled, but there was a sharpness in her eyes, as if she knew exactly why the judge had sent her. "I'm Ms. Reynolds, the director here." Come with me. Miss Carter followed her inside. The air smelled like crayons and old books. Children sat at tables, working on art projects, while others played games in a small recreation area. This center helps kids from difficult backgrounds, Ms. Reynolds explained. Many of them have faced discrimination, poverty, or neglect. We give them a safe space. She stopped and looked Miss Carter in the eye. Your job is to help them, not judge them. Understood? Miss Carter swallowed. Yes, ma'am. Good. Ms. Reynolds handed her a stack of books. You'll start with tutoring. The kids need help with reading. Miss Carter hesitated before following her to a small table. A little girl with pigtails and bright eyes sat there, kicking her legs under the chair. This is Amara, Ms. Reynolds said. She's 6. She struggles with reading but loves stories. Miss Carter forced a smile as she sat down. Hi, Amara. Amara gave her a skeptical look. Are you mean? Miss Carter blinked, caught off guard. What? Jordan said some people are mean without knowing they are, Amara said. Are you like that? Miss Carter opened her mouth but found she had no immediate answer. For the first time since this all began, she realized maybe she really had been. And maybe, just maybe, she had a lot to learn. Miss Carter took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Amara's question settle over her. Are you mean? She wanted to say no, to insist that she wasn't like that. But after everything that had happened, after standing in that courtroom and facing the consequences of her words, she wasn't sure if she could answer so easily. I don't want to be, she finally said. Amara tilted her head, considering her words. Then, without hesitation, she pushed a book toward Miss Carter. Okay, read with me. For the first time since stepping into the youth center, Miss Carter let out a small breath of relief. The first few weeks were difficult. At first, the kids were hesitant around her. Some ignored her. Others, like Amara, watched her carefully, as if trying to figure out if she really deserved to be there. Jordan, though never rude, kept his distance, treating her as just another volunteer. But slowly, things began to change. She spent her afternoons helping the younger kids with their reading and math, realizing how eager they were to learn if someone just took the time to listen. She helped organize art projects, sat with them during lunch, and learned their names, their stories. And with each passing day, she saw herself a little differently. She saw how careless words could leave wounds deeper than she ever understood. She saw how some of the kids, even at such a young age, already knew what it felt like to be judged unfairly. One afternoon, as she packed up to leave, Jordan finally approached her. You're different now, he said simply. Miss Carter looked at him. How can you tell? He gave a small shrug. You listen more. You don't just talk. She thought about that. Maybe, for the first time in her life, she had learned the value of listening to other people's experiences, to the impact of her words, to the things she had once ignored. As her community service came to an end, Ms. Reynolds called her into the office. Your hours are almost up, she said. You don't have to come back after next week. Miss Carter hesitated. A few months ago, she would have been relieved, but now the idea of leaving felt strange. Can I still volunteer? She asked, surprising even herself. Ms. Reynolds smiled knowingly. Of course. On her last official day of service, as she was leaving, Amara ran up to her and hugged her tightly. "You're not mean anymore," the little girl declared. Miss Carter knelt to her level. "I hope not," she said softly. "I'm trying." She stood up, catching Jordan watching her from across the room. He nodded once, and this time, she knew what it meant. Forgiveness wasn't given freely. It had to be earned. And maybe, just maybe, she was finally on the right path.